Hello, everyone, and welcome to Alumni Career Talks Digital Marketing. My name is Michelle Levy, and I'm the Assistant Director of Graduate Business Career Services. Before we get started, if you all don't mind, if you could chat into the chat box that you can hear me, just to make sure that all of our technology is working. If you could chat, that would be great. Perfect. Thank you. Thank you all. So welcome again to Alumni Career Talks Digital Marketing. We're going to be spending our next hour or so with our alumni who's going to kind of share her experience with us about digital marketing and share any insights and tips for you all. So thank you all for joining. Just a little housekeeping, you are on mute. So if you do have any questions during the presentation, you can chat them into the chat box. So I have questions prepared, but also this is a time for you to ask any questions of someone who's working in the field, how they got there. So wanted to make that available for you all. Perfect. So just making sure everyone can hear me. So before we get started, I did want to give a plug for Graduate Business Career Services. And we put on these programs to help you explore different career paths that are out there. And, we want to make known of our hot jobs and opportunities page. This is where we have internships, full-time positions, part-time. We highlight the different events that are happening on campus. So this is a really great page for you to bookmark. And if you are an undergraduate student, you want to be sure to check out what's going on at the Career Development Center. They have a lot of great resources for your career development overall. So without further ado, I want to welcome our speaker today, who's going to be talking about her career path and different insights into finding a job and networking and all that important information for you all to know. So before we start with Chris, I'm going to give you a quick bio so you get to know her a little bit more. So Kerissa Kelly-Slatten is the digital marketing manager for Salvation Army California Division. She is responsible for overseeing and managing the digital marketing team, platforms, media buys, and associated vendor partners. With a degree in marketing and entrepreneurship from the University of Arizona and an MBA from Cal State Long Beach, Kerissa has over 10 years of marketing and communications experience. So thank you, Kerissa, for being here and for sharing your experience with everyone.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Michelle. Thank you for the invitation to be here. And thank you all for taking an hour out of your time and during a Monday evening. I know everybody's busy, so really appreciate your time. Very excited to be here today to talk about digital marketing and marketing currently and kind of where it's going, and hopefully talk about some careers. So thank you very much.
Yeah, so again, if you have any questions, chat them into the chat box. I'll be monitoring them and also kind of putting a plug out for that. But, we're going to start out with Kerissa. If you could tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got your career started in digital marketing.
Yeah, definitely. So my family had some entrepreneurs in it, so I was always kind of thinking about business and started looking at different programs. Like Michelle mentioned, I ended up going to a University of Arizona for their business program, mostly for entrepreneurship. And the reason I mentioned entrepreneurship is because that's been very helpful in connecting all the different business departments. And it's really helped play a part in my digital marketing career. And so once I did that, I got some industry experience, and I was really looking to help take my skills to the next level, especially my managerial skills. So that's where I went to Cal State Long Beach. They had a fabulous MBA program, as most of you may or may not know. And that really helped connect me with different industry professionals, get that team leader experience, and then really launch my career into the digital marketing age. So I definitely say the more experience you can get, wonderful. And also utilizing your classes, your professors, because you never know what door that'll open.
Definitely, yeah, taking advantage of all the different resources. So could you tell us a little bit about what does your role entail and what does a typical day look like for you in your position?
Yes, certainly. So I'm currently a digital marketing manager. So a lot of my role does involve managing my team. Given that we are in the midst of COVID still, we are virtual with some in-person events. So a lot of that does a lot of my time does include a lot of emails and project management. Aside from that, I also spend a lot of time on the digital marketing component. So that might be working with vendors, it might be looking at creative, it might be talking about strategy with my team or planning out our future campaigns. Then once a campaign kicks off, it's going to be a lot of monitoring and tracking and implementing and kind of deciding if we need to make any changes and monitoring. Then there's always kind of a wrap-up reporting and planning again for the next year. So it definitely kind of twofold because I am a manager. In previous digital marketing positions where I didn't have a big of a team to manage, it was definitely more focused on campaign, brand strategy, content creation.
So can you tell me, like, what does like a campaign entail for you? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, so a lot of it comes with what's the purpose, right? So a lot of the work is if we're going to be working with a vendor, we might request proposal from multiple vendors on an upcoming campaign. So before we can send that RFP, request for proposal, we need to talk with our internal team about what the campaign goals are. Is this going to be more top of funnel where we're just trying to grow brand awareness? Is it going to be more lower funnel where we're actually trying to drive sales or clicks or donations? So in my case, I now work at a nonprofit, but coming from the private world, you might be driving sales of a product. Now I'm trying to look to drive donations. So once our internal team agrees on that, we might create slides that we'll then send out to our vendors, ask them to put together a proposal that usually includes the time frame, the type of campaign, the platforms, target markets, always very important, the budget, etc. They'll send that back to us, and then we kind of work on negotiations. Once we select our vendor, we'll move forward with the campaign. And that might look like many meetings, a timeline, a lot of project management is needed. There's a lot of back and forth in deciding, okay, is this the strategy? What are we going to do going forward? What components are necessary? So you might have direct mail, which is like the hard pieces of mail you get sent to you, snail mail, right? You might also have email marketing. That's grown in importance today. So I'd say if you can get experience in that area, great. Display, right, are going to be ads that you might see on your laptop or mobile, social media, connected TVs, very big. So again, deciding on all of those components, then you got to have creative for each piece. Your creative team may be in-house. It might be a vendor. There might be some type of partnership. And then decide budget, right? Where, depending on your strategy, where's your budget going? And then of course, KPIs, which are your goals. How are you going to measure it? Then of course, there's the implementation. And then again, kind of like I said before, you're going to be tracking, monitoring, making adjustments. And then at the end, you're going to be wrapping up your campaign, deciding how did it go? What changes would you make next time?
Yeah, it sounds very extensive, a lot of different pieces to it. And did you see like a difference of like kind of working at a for-profit versus a nonprofit, like in terms of the work that you were doing?
You know, that's a great question. And I would say yes and no. On the one hand, budget does play a big part. When you have a smaller budget, you have to be a little more nimble. That being said, businesses also need to be nimble to survive in this kind of current day and age. I think the biggest difference is going to be kind of on your KPIs or your goals, right? So again, if you have a business where you're actually selling product, you're trying to get that product sold. So again, if you're at the top of the funnel, growing brand awareness, getting consumers, to know about your brand and knowledgeable of your brand, you're still driving them to the end point, which is to be selling that product. Versus a nonprofit, you might be looking at either brand awareness. If you're top of funnel, you're still going to be driving through the bottom, but maybe you're looking more for donations rather than selling a product. So there are similarities. There's definitely differences. I would say it really depends on the size as well. I'd say similar business sizes are probably going to be a little more similar to nonprofits. The other big difference is the relationships. I think relationships are very, very important in business. I think they're even more crucial in nonprofits. Those partnerships, working with government partners, working with local city and legislators, those are important in business. They're even more critical in nonprofits.
Yeah, so I think it's important for students to think about, in terms of like they know they want to do digital marketing, but what does that industry or company look like for them? So
Exactly. And I would say one of the things when I worked at my previous ad agency, one of the goals from a career standpoint was trying to get as much experience across different types of business. So for example, maybe working on a car account versus a CPG, consumer packaged good account, versus an entertainment account. And the idea was that you would get experience at different ones and be able to take that to your next account or your next job. The same can be said across industries. Unless you know you're like, I love this industry, it's the one I want to go in. Even then, it can be really helpful to build your skills across industries. I can tell you, having worked in the service sector, healthcare sector, education sector, consumer packaged goods, specifically for pet sector, to a very small startup nonprofit to a globally recognized nonprofit. Each experience I learned a lot from, and it's really helped me kind of move my career forward. So I would say, never feel like you're stuck in one position. Really try and learn and take what you can and use that to help build your next step in your career path forward.
Yes, definitely. So we have a question that's a great question. What are some hard skills that we should start developing? Do you recommend learning Photoshop, coding, etc., while we begin entry-level positions?
Great question. So I would say, yes, get familiar with all of those to a certain degree. If you are the type where you're like, I want to be a designer, you're going to have to know Photoshop, Adobe inside out. However, even as a manager, it's important to at least know some basic skills. So when your designer comes to you, or your art team comes to you, you have some idea of what they're talking about. The digital world changes every second. So there's no way one person can know everything. And this was something, I think Michelle had asked me, what's one tip you wish you would have known? That's something I wish I would have been told from the start, because it was a little stressful at the beginning to be like, it changes all the time and I'm told to stay on top of it. How do I do that? And I feel like the faster time goes, the more there's vendors out there and new platforms and new tools. And, I'm trying to do school and I'm trying to learn everything. And by the time I learn it, I don't even have time to implement it. So just take a breath. You don't have to know everything, and nobody will. Learn what you know best and what you enjoy, and really look to strengthen those skills. It's always good to work on your weaker skills too. But I would encourage everyone who's interested in digital marketing to do research in the industry. So I have some great kind of suggestions, and I can send these to Michelle after if she wants to include them. Industry journals are really important, and that's kind of just a vague term, but you can look them up. So for example, one that I recommend is code3.com. So it's CODE3, the number 3.com. They're great in terms of industry news and social media in particular, but platforms. So you can subscribe to their newsletters and kind of get the latest. Ad Age is another one that you're probably very familiar with if you're into digital media at all. That's adage.com. And then there's other ones if you're more into nonprofit digital marketing. M&R, which is mrss.com, is great. And they have a lot of tools, free tools and resources that you can kind of look at. They have a lot of case studies. I would highly encourage everyone to look into case studies. And then familiarize yourself with just world and global news. For example, we might hear about Amazon. Well, think about it from the consumer perspective, but then think about it from the business side as well. If Amazon's growing, what does that mean for vendors? Amazon now has its own marketing department, its own marketing league. It's basically its own marketing vendor and everything all built inside. And this has been going on for a while, but now as a digital marketing manager or employee, you have to think about, am I going to do ad placements on Amazon? Well, it might make sense depending on the organization you work with, or it might not. So again, educating yourself on the platforms that are out there, the industry, that'll hopefully help give you insight and to really make better business decisions. Hopefully that answered the question, Michelle. I can go back and
that's great. And I love the journals that you shared. And this is kind of piggybacking off of this, not so much the hard skills, but what are just general skills or experience you think that are essential for students that they should know if they want to work in digital marketing? So, maybe more of those hard skills, soft skills, or just general experiences they should be looking to get.
Definitely. So I would say communication, and part of that wrapped up in it is teamwork. So what you're doing in school right now is as frustrating as it may be sometimes, because I was kind of never a fan of teamwork, because I always felt like there's one or two people that do all the work, and it's helpful because that's the real world, and you have to learn how to work with people, not just people you don't like, but even people you really like. Sometimes a lot can get lost in translation, and so if you utilize this time with your classmates in your school projects and even work experience, and work on those communication skills, because a lot can be said in an email, a lot can be missed. I know one of the classes I specifically took during undergrad was focused on business email communication. I still utilize those rules. And I had a colleague the other day tell me, you know what, the way you replied to that one vendor was really helpful. We had to gently push back and say, no, we could not do something, but you have to say in a way that maintains the partnership. So those are some soft skills. I would say communication, teamwork, very, very important. As far as hard skills go, platforms that are out there, yes, Adobe, any analytical platforms you hear about, learn about them. If you feel comfortable taking a class or doing a certification through one of the online programs, that's great. If you want to get a certification, some of them are free, some of them you have to pay for. That can help. I'd say at entry level, you really are just trying to get your foot in the door. And that means networking. So I don't know, Michelle, if we're kind of onto that part yet. But I'd hate to say you have to know this hard skill, you have to know this technology, and it's the end all be and you'll get the job. That's not necessarily the case. I'd say a lot of it is really getting that experience and networking and figuring out what you enjoy and what you're good at, and really putting that forth in your resume. And even when you talk to people, remember, you are a brand. So what is unique about you? For me, I like to really touch on my sustainability experience. So when I talk about my digital marketing skills, that's something I'm very passionate about. It also helps me stand out. The average digital marketer is not necessarily talking about sustainability. So that's one way I can connect. That's my elevator pitch when I'm out talking. And as far as networking goes, you never know when there's going to be a networking moment, right? You might be talking to your local, I don't know, somebody who's making your coffee, right? Just chatting it up. You never know who knows somebody, and people are changing jobs all the time. Plus, you're just practicing your conversation skills, and that'll be really helpful for any team you're going to be part of or you're going to manage.
And I guess in terms of networking, when you were starting out, what did you do to network? And now being in this manager role, what do you continue to do to network? What does that look like for you? Maybe even pre-COVID, post, now in COVID, networking's changed, right? So what does that look like for you?
Yeah, I love that question. So networking, the word itself always kind of scared me a little bit. I always felt so formal and like a convention, and I have been to some conventions, and even those seem a little sterile and kind of standoffish sometimes. So I like to think of it as building relationships, right? And we're all different types of people. Some of us are more introverts and extroverts. That is totally fine. Just kind of own who you are, and again, build your brand. So when it comes to networking or building relationships, do small steps, right? And I think remember that you have your online profile or persona, and then you also have your in-person one, and it's important to monitor both. So when you're networking online, make sure your LinkedIn is up to date. That's the platform that's really used right now when it comes to career connections. So make sure you have a good profile picture, your classes, any certifications you have, connect with people. I'll be happy to leave my LinkedIn profile here in the chat or give it to Michelle. Feel free to connect with me, connect with your professors and others you meet in your classes. So that's one way. The other thing in terms of your digital profile is make sure your social accounts represent the brand you want companies to see, right? So if you have personal things that you're not super happy with, that maybe are inappropriate, lock those down and recognize that once it's out there, companies can find it. So even if it's private, something can probably be found. So just start thinking about that, especially as you move into your professional career. When it comes to networking in person, especially, I get it, it's hard with COVID. Really taking every opportunity that you can, right? So I honestly haven't been to a networking convention in the last couple of years. That being said, I've still utilized moments where I meet people to connect. And that's a lot of it, is just maybe starting a conversation, asking, about their job, if you're able to, if you feel comfortable with that, or just what type of work are they doing? Even if they're not doing digital marketing, you might learn something, or you might find something that you can talk about that might turn the conversation in a different direction. One of my former professors always said, go with the solution. So if you can provide a solution to somebody, that will really stick out. So rather than asking somebody for help, right? Hey, can you help me network? Talk to them and say, hey, what's challenging in your job right now? And maybe it starts a conversation and see ways that you could help them, right? People like when you offer help. As far as what I do currently to network in my career, I like to mentor my own teammates and my own employees that I'm managing. So about once a month or every other month, we do a check-in, just 20 minutes, maybe a half hour kind of career check-in, see what their plans are. I don't assume that every employee is going to want to stay with the organization that they're at. If they do, fabulous. But mostly I want to focus on growth. Are they enjoying what they're doing? How can I help them grow? How can I help them be a better teammate? Feel more fulfilled? Because I find that employees in workplaces that are happy, I don't mean like fake happy where every day is amazing. I don't mean that, but just, content and feel like what they're doing matters and feel like they matter, that they'll do better work and the team works better together. And if we can be there to support each other, great. So I really like to build in time. And I think it's important for all of you to build in time to your schedule. For me, that means actually putting time on my on my calendar, my Outlook calendar, or my personal phone, wherever it is, and put time to network or to work on your career. Maybe one time that means putting a new project on your LinkedIn or making an effort to go connect with somebody that you're like, I should have connected with them or sent them an invite. Maybe it means calling somebody and just following up, which I know the telephone can be kind of, even I don't like to do anymore. I'm like, why is somebody calling me? Just text me or send me an email. But really, it's doing those things that'll help you stand out. Personal cards. I love cards. So I'm probably making this plug more for myself, but it will stand out. If you get somebody's birthday and you really like them, they're a good friend or mentor, and you follow up with that way, that'll help you stand out and build that connection. Again, do things that are authentic to you. If you're like, there's no way I'm doing birthday cards, fine, don't do birthday cards. For me, I like doing it. So I think the other thing that I kind of mentioned was mentors. If you can find a professor or a parent's friend or a colleague, I don't know, somebody that you look up to and you kind of like what they're doing, even if it's not the exact industry that you want or the exact job, but you like how they're going about their professional work, connect with them, and stay in contact. I love when I, get a text or a call or email from a former colleague or a coworker or even mentees that I've worked with, and they're like, "Hey, Kerissa, do you want to grab coffee?" Or "I just want to see how you're doing." I love that, and most people do, especially now with COVID. It's those little touches.
Yeah, definitely. It's all those little things that you can do just to help stand out. And I love that as a supervisor, you're focused on your employees' career growth and realizing like they may be there short term, long term, but I think that's the environment people want overall. So that's awesome to hear. And a plug, we do as in graduate business career services, we do offer our mentor program, which Chris has been a mentor before for us. So keep a lookout for that in the spring if you're a graduate business student to get involved with. So I have questions still, but again, if you all have any questions, chat them into the chat box. This is someone in the industry, kind of hear it from that. And I'm sure she's hired a bunch of people, as a manager. So we'll get to other questions, but again, chat them into the chat box. So, seeing that you're in the field, you said it's constantly changing. I feel like there's like you said, a new platform every day. I can't get on board with TikTok. I just can't do it. But, I'm like Instagram all the way. But how do you see digital marketing field developing in the future? And how is the field changing? Like, what should the students be aware of that you've seen, from working in the industry?
Yeah, definitely. So it feels like there are certain places that used to be the Wild West that we would even say, oh, this is the Wild West, that slowly become more cultivated. So for example, I'll give you one, it's influencers. Even 5 years ago, those were very new. Nobody knew what was going on. It was Wild West. Should we hire an agency that specializes in influencers? Should we work with influencers directly? How does the legal process go? Is it bad? Is it good? So now that more brands and organizations are more comfortable working with influencers, it's kind of one of those things that everybody does. And it's more recognized and well known and a little more established. There's always going to be something new that's coming. TikTok, like Michelle answered, is a platform that it's not quite the Wild West anymore. We're a little more familiar with it. There's always going to be a new platform out there or a new way to connect with consumers. My advice on this is you don't necessarily have to jump in right away. When you're purchasing, when you're looking at your strategy and your media plan. Just because it's the latest and greatest doesn't mean you have to go out, rush out and spend millions of dollars on that. It's better to look at what your plan is. Does it even make sense? If something's a startup, it's okay, especially with more traditional brands, to give it time to kind of prove itself. As far as staying up with it in terms of a digital marketer, again, this is where your industry research, your industry news is going to be really helpful. Case studies are really helpful as well. If any of you are at ad jobs or ad agencies or wanting to get into that, you might hear of a lunch and learn. They might even be available out there now, where a vendor comes and kind of presents their portfolio of tools. Those sessions are helpful. One, it's like a sales call, so they're letting you know, hey, these are all the tools I have. Would you be interested in spending money with me? It's also a great time to connect and also learn about the new up and coming tools that are out there. So I definitely say take advantage of any lunch and learns. A lot of times you can find these sometimes just on LinkedIn. So if there's groups that you want to follow or industries you're fond of, or even brands, they'll put out information that you can join different digital webinars for free and learn about some of these new up and coming technologies.
Definitely. So we have a question kind of going back to the hard skills. That is, after you learn some of the hard skills, such as Photoshop, coding, etc., what would be the best way to output those skill sets? So, putting together a portfolio, or like, how could you show to an employer you have these skill sets rather than just like listing it on your resume?
I love that question. And yes, a portfolio is great. Again, how do you build your portfolio? You've actually done the work. So if you don't have your job, but you're trying to get your foot in the door, nobody likes to work for free, but there's always volunteering. Or start small, right? Maybe you're not a full-blown consultant yet, but maybe you can find, apologies, there's a siren for my dog. Maybe you can find somebody who's willing to use your skills for a little bit.
It's real life, man.
Real life Zoom. I know I don't have kids running in the background, but I do have a dog sometimes. So apologies, everybody, for that.
Perfect. And then someone else wrote, as someone who's trying to pivot from HR to digital marketing, what's the best thing to start working on, or how should they think about making that transition?
Oh, I love that one. So I would think with HR, you might already have a little bit of an in because you're able to see a variety of different jobs out there, and also what a digital marketing position might be looking for specifically. Maybe you've even interviewed some digital strategists or media planners. So just like my advice would be to get into any field, get to know the industry, right? Read up on those trade journals, do your research, get to know people in the industry, connect with them, build that portfolio, like Michelle was just saying. If you're not sure, like you're like, I don't know how to build a media plan, that's what YouTube's for. Go out and start learning about it, right? Learn about some of these smaller organizations that need people. I don't know if anybody's heard, but the global economy, we have a lot of jobs and not enough people filling them in the US. Well, that's a great time that if you have the bandwidth to go offer a few hours to somebody, right? Maybe it's a nonprofit or a local organization that needs some help. You'd be surprised how many nonprofits or smaller, even small businesses. I'm always doing a plug for small businesses. They're the backbone of our economy. How many of them could use some digital marketing people in their office or for help? So if you're willing to reach out and offer some services, and maybe you don't know all the answers, and you have to be transparent about that. Hey, I don't know everything, but I just wanted to see if you could use some help. The thing is, most of you are probably more up to date on some of those digital tools than maybe some of their leaders are. So if you can offer some of that, and then in return get some experience and say, hey, if I help you with your website or help you with your, maybe social tools or your maybe Facebook, you're trying to reach more customers. Do you think, maybe I could include this in my portfolio, or maybe you need a new logo. Can I help you kind of redesign that? Or, oh, you want to try and get, I don't know, it's a dry cleaning business and you're trying to bring in more customers. Can I work with you on building a plan for that? Oh, your budget's very, very small. Okay, well, what can we do? Or what are some guerrilla tactics we could use to drive customers through the door? Oh, you don't want to drive customers because we're in COVID. Okay, what are some digital strategies I could use to just raise awareness? So there's a lot you could do. If you can't get experience by getting somebody to hire you because you need to build it, start working on it yourself. You can definitely do that. And you'd be surprised by how many places would really need your help. There's a lot of internships out there. And I know everybody needs to be paid. I totally get that. You could probably find a place that'll pay you too, but just maybe not as much as you'd like. So I think if you can be flexible in that, and be willing to kind of look for people that are in organizations that need help and work with them, you can start getting that experience in different and kind of non-traditional methods.
Yeah, there's also a website called Parker Dewey, and they offer, and I'll put that into the chat, they offer micro internships. So what that means is like, it's just projects basically. So people go on and they like need a social media plan or they need a logo, and they put this on this website, and then they offer like their payment structure or whatnot. So it's just little ways that you could build your portfolio without doing a full-blown internship. So micro internships is a new thing in the field. So we have another question that what is a day in the life as a marketing supervisor? So what does your, I'm sure every day looks different, but what does that day in the life look like for you?
Yeah, so I know I touched on it a little bit. I'm very organized, and I think that helps me a lot in this role because, like Michelle mentioned, there's a lot of moving pieces. So even before getting to my week, I like to really lay out my calendar. So for me, that means looking at all my meetings to start with. Those are pretty solid for the most part, unless they get moved. I like to block out check-ins with my team. So now that I'm working mostly virtual, I like to have one-on-one check-ins so I can review the project list or go over any updates because yes, we have meetings and their team meetings, but it's really hard to get everybody's input sometimes, like individually when you're on a meeting with, 20 different people. A lot of times we're just trying to click through the agenda so we can get to a run to our next meeting. So kind of building those in. I also like to set aside time for emails and then any projects I have where I need to give an employee feedback on something, or I need to actually go, write something out and do some work. I really try and block that time off. For me, that works really well. I take a lot of notes. One thing I love doing after a meeting is doing recap notes. So I'll take notes and then included in that is next steps. And that specifically calls out each person so everybody knows what they're responsible for. I can't tell you that most organizations I've worked with haven't done this. I learned this skill, I think just through going through classes and being organized, but at our digital ad agency, we had a project manager. She was fabulous at this. It really helped. One, keep us all on track. And two, it's kind of like with classes, when you have 20 different meetings and you're tired, you might think, oh, I'll remember that. And then it's like 3 days later, and you can't quite remember where were we on this project? But if you can reference your meetings and your notes, then you know. Also, it allows you to follow up. And I can't tell you, I even tell my employees, a big percentage of our job is just following up on something. And it doesn't mean because people are being mean and trying not to get what they need to get you, right? You have a proposal and it's like, yeah, I'll have that done Friday. Well, Thursday, maybe check in with them. And then maybe Monday, if they haven't sent it, hey, where are we on this? Sometimes people have a legit reason for not getting it to you. So a lot of my job is on following up and then communication and coordinating. So again, project management, with all those moving pieces, you have to be able to organize a timeline. How do you build a timeline? Well, you kind of back into it, right? So you might know maybe your deadline, all the pieces, building it out. So practice right now on yourself. Like if you have a job, if you have classes, start getting your time management down, work on your calendar. And then if you're like, hey, I have a lot of time Wednesday, hey, do some networking, work on your career skills, or, start putting together, you're like, I'm really passionate about, helping animals and I like digital marketing. Well, guess what? The Humane Society or, local pet shelter, even if there isn't an internship with them, maybe do a project and then email it to some other people and be like, hey, this is just a passion project. Just wanted to get this out in front of you because I love it. You can also start following them on social media and tag them. A lot of organizations have, yes, there's bots and technology that's utilized, but they also use people. So, and people read those messages. So connecting with them that way is really helpful. So sorry, Michelle, I know that was kind of all over the place with my schedule, but it's a lot for sure. But staying organized is very important in time management.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Time management is something that never ends, right? You think, oh, once I get working, like I don't have to worry about time management. Like, no, it's really important as well and trying to get that work
and
done.
The last thing I'd say on that is recognizing when you do your best work and when your employees do your best work. So for me, that means in the morning. Some of my employees work better a little bit later. Some start super early. So recognizing that, and if you're getting to the point where you're really exhausted and shift your work around so it kind of works with that. Obviously, if you have a meeting or class, you just got to do it. But if I know, like I tend to get a little tired mid-afternoon, so I try and do some easier work then and build it in that way. So I think a lot of that's just being kind of mature and understanding yourself and how you do your best work. Working on those skills now will definitely help you in digital marketing because digital marketing, you can get hundreds of emails a day and being able to stay on top of them and knowing how to quickly read through or which ones to sort through. you gotta practice that. So doing that now is really helpful.
Yeah, it definitely sounds very fast paced in general.
Very.
So as like as someone who's manages a team, I'm sure you've had to hire a lot of people and go through that process. Do you have any tips to stand out during the application process when applying? I mean, things you've seen that worked well, maybe things you've seen that haven't worked well. Like, how can these students like stand out during this application process when they're competing against a lot of other people?
Yes, definitely. So I think understanding that algorithms are used for a lot of that first chunk of the HR process, right? So making sure that you do have a good resume, that it has the right keywords there. Having multiple resumes, multiple cover letters, so you can customize them to the job and position and industry and organization that you're applying for. Having one resume and sending it out just bunches of times is just most likely a waste of time. I'm not saying you're not going to get a job that way, but it's really that customization. And then it's understanding the organization and getting to know people in that organization if possible. I'm much more apt to hire somebody who's been recommended to me or even been emailed. We've had an email introduction. So if you can get email introductions to anybody, again, start with LinkedIn, start with people you know, parents, cousins, colleagues, people at school, go bug your professors, try and get that introduction somehow. Use your mentors. That will definitely give you the leg up. I can tell you most of the jobs, not all of them. Some I really have, I've applied, my experience has spoken for itself. I made it through all the interview rounds, great. But a lot of the early ones, it was because of people I knew. And I'm not ashamed to say that. And most people I talk to now, that's how they've gotten some of their first jobs, is friend of a friend. And it doesn't have to be the perfect job. I don't think there is a necessarily a perfect job. Not that you're not going to love it, but I think just understand sometimes you just need to get your foot in the door. And sometimes, I don't want to say any door, right? Be somewhat selective, but sometimes you just need to get started. So I think recognizing where can you be picky, what are your must-haves and what are your nice-to-haves, and then kind of go from there.
So, but that customization, getting a referral, reaching out to the hiring manager kind of makes you stand out. Have you seen anything that's like that people have done that like have worked really badly against them or made them stand out in the wrong way that students shouldn't be doing?
I think it's things that probably we're all very well aware of, right? Like spell check. I mean, that should kind of come without saying. But I think just sloppiness, like the way you present yourself again digitally, yes, LinkedIn, but also, your resume and your cover letter is really important. And I think if and when you do get an interview, and I'm assuming that you all will, you all are amazing people, making sure you set aside time to prep for that, right? I can remember back, we've had multiple interviews at my last organization, and sometimes somebody just, wasn't maybe prepared. I'd also say practice, right? It takes time, and of course you're nervous. It's an interview. You should be a little nervous, but the more you can practice in front of a mirror, in front of, have a friend log on with you. Hey, let's just go back and forth and pretend that we're interviewing each other. That really helps, right? Because you want to be prepared for those questions. You may not know every question that they're going to throw at you, but the more preparation you can do, the better. The more interviews you can do, I'd say the better, because it's practice. You get prepared, you know how to answer something. Again, it goes back to your branding. Who's the person that you're trying to present? What's your brand? How can you say that quickly, efficiently, nicely, right? Because again, even in interviews, sometimes like we only have so much time. And when we are interviewing a lot of people, yes, people are answering the questions, but somebody that stands out, that seems knowledgeable and seems earnest and hardworking, I think that also carries a lot of weight, right? People that are willing to learn, that sometimes goes further than just somebody who comes across as like, I know everything, right? I know everything, and that's that. Versus somebody who's very much like, I have a passion for this, and I'm a quick learner. I'm willing to help the team out. I'm willing to be flexible and give it my all. That can really carry a lot of weight. Again, that's hard to put through in a resume. So that's where you got to make it through that first round of algorithms. And to Michelle's point, that's where networking or having those introductions really does help.
Yeah, and just to put a plug for the Graduate Business Career Services and the Career Development Center, we do mock interviews. So, we are here to help you, and we have interview platforms like Big Interview to help you with that as well. So definitely a good point to practice and get those nerves out and make sure you're putting your best foot forward. And also just kind of a random questions. I know you mentioned like being on social media, like being in digital marketing, is it expected that you like you share your socials, or is it like fine if it's private, or like what's that expectation? Like, do you Google the people that you're hiring, and like what does that look like?
So yes, and all of you should have Googled yourself if you haven't already. You should know what comes up, and you should probably do it if not every quarter, every couple months. If you're applying, you should, and you're not sure what's out there, maybe do it more. I would recommend that your accounts, your personal stuff, be private. Um, for me personally, I've again been in digital media quite a while. I always kind of made sure to have things private and just not be on some platforms. If there's some that I just don't really like, I'm just not there. If it's a platform you can't live without, I can't live without my Instagram or my TikTok, that's fine. Keep it private when possible. If you can't keep it private, but you're in the midst of a career search, then you better start looking at that content and really making sure untag things, delete things, hide things if necessary. Because it really, it does make a difference. And maybe somebody won't find it, but there's a chance that they might. It really depends on the org, but you should be very comfortable Google searching yourself, looking through your account and be like, you know what, I'm comfortable with this. If this photo was to come up, that's fine. A lot of, I wouldn't say a lot, but there are a lot of my past positions, we've had interactions with different things, right? There's times where we've been at trade shows and we might be celebrating, maybe we're having dinner, there's drinks. So it's not like things don't come up, but again, it's being professional about it, right? We were definitely coached through like, hey, vendors might try and give you gifts. This is okay when we're following these guidelines. It's not okay here. So again, just being mindful, what is your organization's policies, practices? How are you implementing those? If you're looking for a job right now, implement your own policies and practices for yourself. How are you going to conduct yourself? Again, it's digital marketing. So everybody should know that we can find pretty much everything, even your hidden stuff. Just be cognizant of that. But to answer Michelle's question of, do I have to be everywhere? No, I am definitely not. I almost think it's more professional to be like, I choose to be on these platforms for these reasons. I enjoy them and they help me connect with friends or what have you. I choose not to be on these platforms. The other thing when it comes to both professional and personal is you don't have to be on everything, right? Kind of like what I said, you don't have to jump after the next newest tool. You don't need to be on all of them. So I think just picking and choosing wisely, and you're all professionals. So making, acting like a professional and being the best brand that you can be.
Yeah, you're definitely your own brand and selling that to the organization. So I know you mentioned this a little bit already, but what's one thing you wish someone would have told you before going into digital marketing, kind of going into this field that's ever changing?
Yeah, so I think aside from you can't know it all, so don't try not to be too anxious about that. I think the other thing is recognizing that it does change quickly. And so staying up with the big trends too, in addition to the journals and newsletters I kind of pointed out, recognizing that data, there's a lot of it. So now we're at the point of how do we manage this data? So kind of educating yourself around that. Also thinking about, yes, when you're at an organization and doing marketing, digital marketing, you are not your target market. That was always something that was like preached to us in all of our marketing classes, right? So understanding your target market's very important, your audience. But you can also look at just your everyday life and how you consume media and kind of look at that in terms of your eyeballs are worth a lot. Your behavior is worth a lot. What does that mean for the industry? How does an organization compete with that intense amount of media that's out there? Right. So as an organization, if I'm doing ad buys, I'm competing against all the other organizations that are also doing ad buys out there. What does that mean for me as a consumer? What does that mean for my target audience? What does that mean for my organizations that I'm going to work at going forward? So I think the piece of advice besides, you don't have to know it all, is know what big industry trends are going on. And this kind of gets to my point of know what's going on in the world, right? Because that will influence the conversations. And I feel like digital media managers, strategists, employees should always have an ear to the ground, not just in their industry, but kind of globally as well, because that'll definitely influence the conversations.
Mm-hmm. It may be something they bring up in an interview and kind of
And
tying
even
it
the
all in.
market. Yeah, I mean, if you can say, look, I understand that there's a lot of media dollars out there. How can I give you the best bang for your buck? Even just being informed about that is helpful. And you sound like you actually know what you're talking about, right?
Definitely, definitely. Well, I have one more question, and also again, if you have a question, please put them into the chat box. But what advice would you have? Like, what's your one kind of culminating piece of advice for someone that wants to break into digital marketing and make this career, make this field their career? Like, what's that one piece of advice that you would give?
Yeah, definitely. So I would say be yourself, and this kind of gets back to your branding, how you brand yourself. Find out what, because digital marketing or even marketing is very, very general. Like that's a very general term. So what specifically are you interested in? And learn about that component. Is it the design elements? Is it search engine optimization, SEO? Is it Google ads? Is it putting together videos? Is it more influencer marketing? Is there a certain aspect that you find really intriguing, and start delving into that? That's what I'd recommend. And you'll find that there's probably jobs out there that you hadn't really thought about that are probably open and more available to you than you would think. So I'd say kind of instead of going just general digital marketing, start really delving into it. And a lot of that comes with both networking and then doing your research. So start talking to people in the industry and finding out like, what is it, what's kind of like you do, what's an everyday job look like? But then specifically, what did you do on that one project, right? I can tell you my last nonprofit job, we were working on COVID vaccination sites. And one of our challenging components was trying to get our residents to come get vaccinated. How do we communicate with them in the language that works for them, right? So again, language is going to be really important. And that's just kind of very specific to that campaign, but very helpful across industries, because language and talking to your target audience is important no matter where you go. So I'd say look at case studies, either ones that you can find online or just by talking to people, and that'll hopefully give you more insight into the industry as well.
And I think this maybe depends on the type of company, but like in this field, like I know you mentioned there's all those different areas. Are there positions where you would do a little bit of everything, or are you always very niche in just one area, or does that really depend on the company?
I'd say it depends on the size of the company. Smaller companies, smaller nonprofits, you tend to wear many more hats, right? So smaller business, you might be doing the creative yourself. You might also be doing the social media content calendar. You might be helping with the strategy and placing the ad buys. You might not even be able to do ad buys with a vendor because your budget's so small, but you might still be buying Facebook ads. Same goes for a small nonprofit. Sometimes the bigger organizations, they have more money, so that's where you tend to specialize. You might have your own analytics team versus a smaller organization. Maybe you are also doing the analytics and the tracking and the reporting. And then a bigger team, you as a manager, you're going to be managing a team, right? Does that mean you have your own in-house creative team? If you're a large organization, you probably do, or you're working with an outside vendor. Again, other smaller places, you might be designing that website yourself, working with WordPress, right? Or working with some other online platform. So understanding websites, email marketing, social media, connected TV, display, those different components of an ad buy, and what are they? How would I use them? What types of ads would I place on them? What target markets would I go after? Familiarizing yourself with the language of digital marketing is really key. To me, when I first started working at the ad agency, I felt like I needed a dictionary. And that literally was my first several meetings. I was writing down so many acronyms I could hardly keep up.
How did you like find out what all those acronyms are, just by being exposed, or?
Being exposed, and before I had started, my friend that had helped me get that job had given me quite a few, like, look at all these digital marketing kind of vocabulary type of lists. They're online. I mean, you can search for most of these things and you'll find them. I mean, a couple words like I never knew. Viewability. What's viewability? It's basically when you do an ad buy, there's a portion of your ad that's maybe not viewable, or you might hear above the fold, below the fold. So when you're scrolling, something that's first visible is above the fold, and it goes back to traditional media when you actually had a print ad. Something that was above the fold, you see, right? Eyeballs see it right away. It's cheaper and not as efficient to be below the fold. Same goes for digital marketing. So viewability gets to, if I'm spending money on an impression or an eyeball, somebody to look at something, I want to make sure it's a real person and not a bot. So there's actually companies out there. One, for example, is IAS. So there's an acronym, Integral Ad Science. the reviewability partner. So you can work with them if your budget's big enough, and they'll help track your reviewability and negotiate with your ad partners. So if you're spending, let's say, 2 million on an ad buy, they can help say, hey, this, whatever percent was not viewable, it was viewed by bots. So we want this added in for free. Just terms like that, just getting comfortable with it. There's a whole lot there. I mean, you could go work for Integral Ad Science, right? The other part I'd mention are doing studies, research studies. So brand awareness studies. If we're doing an ad, you might see them every once in a while on like Facebook or Instagram. Do you want to take this study? Or do you remember seeing an ad about cereal? That's a study that's basically trying to determine how useful was that ad. Did it cause you to remember about cereal or not? There's partners out there that do those. Tracking credit card purchases, and now we have like Venmo and PayPal. Those purchases, tracking those across, there's partners you can go work out that way. So again, digital marketing is very general, and once you delve into the industry, you'll see that there's a lot of partners. There's a lot of startups that need a lot of people. Again, the economy we're in right now, there's a lot of jobs out there that need people. So
yeah, so it's good that you've exposed just how large this industry is, and just talking to people, those resources you talked about to learn more, to kind of find, what is your fit, right? Like where you're doing a little bit of everything, or maybe you're more specialized, and that's something you don't know until you actually engage in it, even outside of school, right? Like you can learn about it one thing, but doing it could be something different. So. Okay, well, we're almost at time, so I just want to say thank you so much for sharing your experience and insight. I know I learned a lot about the industry itself, as well as the skills and experiences that are going to stand out. If you have any last minute questions, I know we'll be available here. I did want to put in the chat the event evaluation. So please, students, if you could click on the Qualtrics link that I just put in the chat to let us know your thoughts and any other ideas that you have in terms of doing these talks to learn more about a field or an industry. Chris has put her LinkedIn address, so she said you could definitely connect with her. So again, that's networking, kind of right then and there. And if you ever need help with your LinkedIn profile, reach out to Graduate Business Career Services or Career Development Center. So again, just want to say a big thank you for your time and sharing your experience and insight. Really appreciate it. I know, again, I learned a lot, and you shared a lot of great information that I'm going to be looking up, all those journals and whatnot and case studies. So thank you again for your time. And if you have any questions, stick around. And if not, thank you for your time, and have a great rest of your Monday and a good rest of your week.
thank you, Michelle. And thank you all for coming. Again, if you have questions, please let me know. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Michelle has my personal information. So if you want to connect with me, I know she'd be more than happy to give it to you. And Michelle, please feel free. Any questions specifically about digital marketing or about careers or mentoring? Again, Michelle runs an amazing program there at the College of Business. I know I've utilized many of the services. I love the mentoring program. So definitely utilize those. They're very, very helpful. But again, if anybody has any other questions, I'm happy to answer them. But otherwise, thank you. You were a lovely crowd. And thank you, Michelle, for the time.
Yes, thank you.